Good evening. Welcome to our Select Board Candidates Forum. My name is Paul Santinello. I'm your host. Tonight we have 2 of 3 candidates running for Select Board seats on an election that is June 11th, 2024. I'd like to welcome Josh Levine, who's on the Select Board currently running for re-election, and Andrew Lamb. Good evening, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
And it's April 22nd, right? Yes, April 22nd that we're filming this. Tonight's program is to give you, the voters, an idea of who's running for office, and hopefully I'll ask them some questions that you have on your mind that they'll be able to answer, and you get to know them a little bit better. So we're going to start with an opening statement from each candidate and then get into the questions, and we're going to alphabetically. So Andrew, You're up.
Hi, I'm Andrew Lamb. I've lived in Longmeadow for 16 years. I have 4 kids. 3 are currently in the Longmeadow schools. And in my day job, I'm a retina surgeon. I operate at Bay State Medical Center, and I'm a writer. I've written 4 books about military and medical history. I've always felt that moving to Longmeadow was one of the best decisions I ever made. And almost from the time I came here, I started volunteering to try to help make our community better. Because I'm interested in historical preservation, I was appointed to the Historical Commission and Historical District Commission, and in 2018, I led the effort to try to save and restore the Brewer-Young Mansion on the Green. And because I think education is very important, and Longmeadow schools are the most important asset we have, I became involved in the Center School Council, and for 6 years I've been a trustee on Bay Path University's Board of Trustees, where I'm the chair of the academic committee. But probably my most important role in town was serving on the finance committee for 9 years. As chair of that committee, I was laser focused on making sure our budgets were prudent and judiciously done and would keep us below the state mandated tax ceiling. I love Longmeadow, and that's why I'm here, and I'm happy to be participating in this conversation. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Josh?
My name is Josh Levine. I grew up in East Longmeadow, left after high school to go to college in DC and stayed for law school, and thought I would never leave, and then I had 3 kids and said, okay, it's time to come home. Moved back to Longmeadow in 2018, and I currently live here with my wife and 3 kids who are all at Center School. And my day job, I'm an attorney in East Longmeadow. I do estate planning and real estate. And when I moved here, one of the promises I made to my wife, part of the deal was that I would never run for office. I did not run. I was appointed to the planning board in 2019, although my wife did send me the listing for that, so she has to take some credit. I was elected in 2020 to the planning board, and then in 2021, there was an election for the select board. I ran for that, and I'm just finishing up my first term. It's been very gratifying to do. It's a lot of work. We have a great group there, and I've really treasured the relationships I've made with the other select board members and with the town officials, the town manager's office, and department heads, and it's been very gratifying, and I've learned a lot in the past year, and I hope to continue that service.
Okay, good. So now what we're going to do is you had the first open statement. I'm going to go to you with the first question, okay? The select board position you're running for is a 3-year term. What are the top 3 things that you would like to accomplish during the next 3 years if you're elected to the board?
Well, one of the things that we have coming up in the next 3 years that I think is the most important issue for our town is the middle school building committee, which I am a member of by virtue of being a select board delegate. I think that is the select board will hear a lot about that, and will, I think, be instrumental in getting information out leading up to the town meeting when we actually have to vote on taking on a good amount of debt for the town. We'll get a lot of state reimbursement, but we're going to have to shell out a lot of money. And I think that our schools, Longmeadow, I moved to this town for our schools. I hear that from people all the time. And if we don't fund our schools, if we don't keep them in good shape, I think that is a real detriment to the town, and there will be no draw to come here. So I think that's the number one thing. Another issue that's on a lot of people's minds is the pipeline. It's been quiet for a bit, but it's going to come back into force at any time. It's currently with the Mass Environmental Protection Agency, but it will go to the DPU Siting Board soon, and that's when Longmeadow is going to have to get very actively involved in in keeping it out of our town or keeping it in a reasonable place in our town. We have fully funded an attorney. I think I had a lot to do with making sure we got that through and onto the warrant. But there's going to be a hard fight, and I think that's very important. And then the third thing that I want to accomplish is we have a really tight budget. As anyone can look at it and see, state law says we have a balanced budget, and we do that, but every year it's a little tougher. And this year especially, our state aid was maybe artificially inflated by COVID and federal funds coming in, and the state had a bonanza, and we got a lot less money from the state this year, and it really shed a light on how close and how tight our budget is. And every year we do an even services budget, and we barely did it this year, and eventually push is going to come to shove, and we can't do that. And one of the things that I think is really important is that we have to explore having a legislative override for Prop 2.5. It unfortunately failed the last time that came up, but I think it's something that we have to be prepared for unless we start cutting services. So that's been quiet because property prices have gone up, assessments have gone up, so we've created a little room in our budget, but that's not going to happen forever. And so I think that we need to start exploring that again and doing some outreach and preparing the town for that.
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think that those are all good points. For me, to be honest, the first three issues are probably the tax ceiling issue and the necessary need to have prudent fiscal management, kind of what Josh alluded to. You know, we are in a very precarious situation in the sense that, for those who do not know, there's a state-mandated tax ceiling. We're all familiar with it, but some viewers might not be. This limits the amount of tax that can be raised to a mill rate of 25, which is 25 per $1,000 of value. And this is a law from the early 1980s. We for many years were the highest tax rate in the state. We were very close to hitting the 25 mill rate. We were about 24.5. It's really not a question of there wasn't an issue with necessarily overspending. It's just the fact that our town is totally built out. There's very few businesses to help bear the burden of tax revenue. And it's not something that we can just vote to change. We can't just say, let's vote to override and become exempt from the tax ceiling. It would require us to change in state law. And really, from our legislators, we know there's not much interest in doing something like that, changing state law for the sake of a little town like Longmeadow. So we're really kind of stuck in this situation where every year the budget is in the red because increasing employment costs, insurance costs, are always going up, and we're always kind of behind with the budget. So on the Finance Committee, my focus, ever since this became a major issue in 2017, was basically to help recommend careful budgeting and prudent budgeting that would keep us below the tax ceiling. I think this is what the most important thing we accomplished in those years when I was on the Finance Committee. We created a very carefully thought out spreadsheet with the help of Paul Pasturzik with many variables, and we made very clear recommendations to the Select Board on what we thought the tax rate could be to keep us from having a rendezvous with the tax ceiling. So for many years, there was just kind of this knee-jerk reaction, let's just increase the taxes to the max every year, which is 2.5%. But because of this good communication and working in the Finance Committee, working with the Select Board and the School Committee, we started lowering that to 2.3 or 2.1 or 1.8 and down to a nadir maybe 1.75, and that's kind of we're bearing the benefits. We're enjoying the benefits of that prudent fiscal management. In addition to the fact that we're kind of backed off a little bit at this moment from the tax ceiling because our home valuations have increased, but this problem is not going away. And I think that frankly, everything we advocate for, schools, seniors, projects like the middle school, it all depends on fiscal stability. And I think that we have to be laser focused on making sure we have prudent budget managing to stay under the tax ceiling, which I think is by far the most important issue we're going to face.
Okay. So I want to ask a follow-up question because I think financially, our town has skated for a lot of years of getting real close to the line. We were able to get real estate has gone through the roof and able to save us time after time. And then we had the Great Recession in 2008, which kind of made things a little sketchy, right? That's where we started going downhill. How do you manage it? So when so roughly 80% of the budget is salaries, roughly 75-80%. When you start adding in like benefits and things like that, roughly, ballparking. So how do you control that? How do you think you control, and I'll start with you, how do you think you control that?
Yeah, I think that, it's kind of all tied in with the taxing issue. What are we going to do about it? I mean, I think there's a few ways, a three-pronged approach. First of all, obviously prudent fiscal management. If we are approaching the tax ceiling again, we've got to do what we did for many years from 2017 until frankly last year, when we either made targeted cuts or tried our very best to do a level service budget. These cuts can be targeted, or there can be like a sequester approach where kind of every department kind of is has an equivalent decrease, so that everyone's kind of sharing the pain. That's absolutely necessary. In addition, I agree with Josh. Like, we have to, try to continue to explore a legislative option for this. Nobody wants to raise taxes, but we want to be in control of our destiny. We want to be able to choose as a town if we're going to either, make cuts to stay well below 25 mill rate, or to go over it if it's our desire to do so collectively as a town, so that our destiny is in our hands. So, right now I don't think there's any appetite in the state government for this, but it's possible that we need to kind of wait for other towns to be in the same predicament that Longmeadow is. So there's multiple towns saying, hey, legislature, we need help here. So we need to keep communicating with our legislators to let them know this is very important to our town. Right now, it's great that we have a breather, but I think that we've got to stay on top of that. And I think there's other creative ways we can reduce expenditures in the town. There's always the possibility of doing fee-based things, like trash could become fee-based, or we have a great brigades of volunteers. Volunteerism here in Longmeadow is incredible. I've never lived in a place where people are more dedicated to volunteerism, and there's a lot of people who would probably be very happy to, do things like landscaping around public buildings like the schools or the library that can help take the load off the DPW, frankly. And also private donations sometimes help a lot. Like, a great example is the Adult Center. There was a $1 million Adult Center fund that basically raised money from people in town. I was happy to be one of the major donors to that. And we furnished the inside of the Adult Center, and that's money the town didn't have to spend, basically. And they've also done that in playgrounds in town. You go to a playground, you see the nice little appreciation plaques with donors' names on them. That's very appropriate and very good, and I think it's a way of also possibly reducing some of the money the town has to spend.
Thank you, Josh.
It's a very good question. Part of the salary, I won't say problem, but the reality is that there's union contracts, there's step increases, salaries are going to go up, and that is, if you look at our budget every year, that is the problem, that salaries are increasing and they're going to increase. And actually, the select board this year voted to increase salaries for some of our employees, especially the fire department, because the fire department was having trouble keeping people. And it's going to be a warrant question for the town to decide, but we're in favor of it because we want to make sure that we are adequately paying our people so we have good employees. But I think the way around that is we have to get creative, as Andrew said, in finding funding. We have a couple major opportunities for that, I believe. One is we're currently looking at having a fiber provider come to town so we can have service our own internet. There's a lot of towns that do that. If done correctly, and if we get enough uptake, that can be a revenue source for the town. It can be a pretty heavy one. And then also, back to the middle school, if we have two schools, if we consolidate to one, which I think will be the preferred solution, we're going to have a parcel that we can make into, it can be a taxable space, or tax generating at least, rather than somewhere we spend money. I don't know exactly what form that will come in, but there is an opportunity there. So the salaries are high because we want to have the best. Teachers get paid more every year. Our town employees they're doing a good job. They deserve to get paid, and we have to work with that, and we have to be creative and find ways to fund our budget otherwise.
Okay, thank you. So, in this, you both have touched on it. Is Prop 2.5 still viable? Meaning the state, is it, can the town, you both, I think you both have answered it, but the town cannot live under 2.5? You go first. I'm sorry, go ahead. What I'm saying is, do you think it's still, does that need to be changed 100%? Because you both, I think, have mentioned that that's an issue that we have potentially going forward.
Well, we are, right now, we always get a prediction from the Finance Committee, and we're at least 10 years out from hitting it. And that has been the case for the last 3 years. We're always at least 10 years out, and partially that is because of the assessments. And so I can't predict the future. Even as a real estate attorney, I have no idea where house values are going. So the short answer is we can live with it, but you had a great turn of phrase, we want to control our own destiny. So if we had a warrant article that said, let's ask the legislature to raise 2.5, it doesn't mean we can raise taxes. It just is the first step. So my short answer is we can live with it. We will, at least for 10 years, and things may change in 10 years. I don't know. So yes, but I think we should be prepared to get around it. But we have time, so that's good. And we've gotten, by prudent financial management, by staying under that 2.5 increase that we could do every year, we've bought ourselves some time, and I'm happy for that. So, but we can live with it.
It's certainly possible to live under the constraints of the tax ceiling. I mean, every other municipality in the whole state is doing it as well, right? So this 10-year thing, which you talked about, was frankly only because the Finance Committee established this as a goal, essentially. Before, when it was basically being raised 2.5%, the max every single year as the increase, it was projected we were going to hit the tax ceiling in 3.5 or 4 years. I mean, and just to be clear with viewers who may not be aware that would be kind of a calamity, you'd have to immediately, if you're going to if your goal is to keep level service, the things that the townspeople and the students enjoy now, you'd basically be faced with immediate layoffs of dozens of teachers and firefighters and police officers, so collectively. So I think that we could do that, and we were prudently managing our budget. It wasn't easy, but by getting everyone kind of on board, the school committee and the select board, I feel like we all worked really well together to try to make sure we didn't raise it to the max, and that's exactly why we're always hopefully going to be 10 years away from hitting this. But to maintain that, it requires cuts, basically, and we've been pretty lucky so far. But if you ask me, do I think we're going to hit it? We will definitely hit it if we try to maintain level services in perpetuity because of inexorably increasing employment costs, health insurance. We're going to, in a higher interest rate environment, we're about to build a middle school probably that's going to be well over $100 million. We've got to really be careful about our debt service, but the costs and the expense of these things are only going up. Inflation alone is a reason why it's going to be going up. So we have a choice, but,
All right, next question is what is the role, what is your perception of the role between the select board and the town manager and the select board and residents? I'll let you go first.
Well, I feel like, first of all, we're lucky we have a very good town manager. I mean, we should not take that for granted. I think it's not an easy job, and we're blessed with that. I mean, I think that it's kind of like my role on the Bay Path Board of Trustees. The ultimate responsibility is with the Board of Trustees in that case, or the Select Board. Now, if you have an excellent president of the university or excellent town manager, sometimes the Select Board's job can be very easy. Not easy, but like everyone's kind of rowing together. The challenge is when you think ethically or management-wise things are going the wrong direction, then it gets tough, and you have to be willing to ask the tough questions and do the tough things to make sure the town is moving in the right direction, the best decisions are being made. As far as the residents, our job is to listen to the residents, to do our best to understand what concerns there are in town, and then, as to the best of our ability, make recommendations to allocate our scarce resources in the best possible way and make the best priorities possible to serve the most people with the resources that we have.
Josh?
I agree wholeheartedly with Andrew on Lynn Simmons. We're very lucky to have her. We do every year, the select board does a review, a performance review. She gets great marks every year. But it's, we do, if we think she made a mistake, we'll tell her, and she takes that into account, and she does. And there's very few, I think, that were true, not even true mistakes. We just may have a difference of opinion. She always explains things well, and she does a great job. But ultimately, it's a collaboration, but she knows that the select board is elected by the town, and we appoint the town manager. The Board of Trustees is a good analogy. The buck stops with us, and I know residents know that. I don't think the select board should get involved in administrative tasks. We shouldn't step on the toes of department heads. And everything should go through the town manager, I think. But I do hear from residents a lot, and and I'm happy to do that. I like discussing with residents and passing on word to the town manager, to the department head, as so be it, because we have to be the ones who make sure that things are running smoothly. That's our job. And I think there's a great example, I'm sure people know about it, on Ellington Street. I live on Farmington. Ellington had lines put on it, and this was about a year ago. I woke up in a hotel on spring break, and I had a bunch of messages from my neighbors saying, hey, they put lines on our street. And people didn't like it, and I talked to the town manager, we had a select board meeting, residents came, and they got our attention, the issue got fixed. And I think that's the way it should work. And I'm happy to do that. It is, like I said before, it is a lot of work. I have a lot of extra time spent talking to people, but that's the job.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's amazing what a line in a street can do. Happened about 20 years ago on Greenacre Avenue, too.
We heard about that a lot.
Oh, my goodness. You want to wake people up about something in town, paint a line on the street. We talked about challenges financially. And there's only so many things that can be outsourced, but what are your opinions of outsourcing as a way to help the town alleviate some of those financial stresses? And Josh, I'll start with you.
Well, we just have to do some outsourcing, but I don't get into the nitty-gritty, but from what I understand, it doesn't necessarily save us money because we have to pay prevailing wages, or we have a state law where we have to pay. But I do think there are some things that we outsource that do save us money because we're not buying equipment, and we may save time by hiring someone else. Even if we have to pay them the same wage, they may be able to do it faster than a DPW employee, so it's their area of expertise. So this may be a bit of a cop-out answer. I don't know if it does save us money. I think the possibility is there. But there are some jobs that the town can't take on. We don't have the staff to do it. I think an example that just popped in my head is the Wolf Swamp Field. We have outsourced the lawn care, and I believe that may be ending, but we outsourced it for a few years because we made a big investment in that field. We want to make sure it's looking great. It's a point of pride for our town. And so we hired an outside company to take care of it, to monitor the irrigation. And I think that was the right thing to do because DPW can get trained up on it. But right off the bat, we want to make sure that we have experts working on it, at least until we take over.
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It has to be a case-by-case basis. Like you could outsource, whether you're outsourcing something like school lunches or trash or, snow plowing. If it's just the economic rule of comparative advantage. If you're doing something every day, all day long, you can get efficiencies. Like a company might be able to do that rather than train, a DPW worker or a team that doesn't do it as often. It's kind of like you want to go, for example, if you need an operation, you want to go to the surgeon who basically does that kind of operation all the time. Sure, you can go to a general surgeon who has done this kind of been trained to do this a little bit, but boy, the person who does it every day, all day long is going to be very efficient at doing it and probably get a better result. So it really depends on, trusting our department heads to ask them what's the cost of doing it and what's the quality of the work that you can do, and compare it on a case-by-case basis with whatever we're trying to outsource or whatever bids we're discussing.
But shouldn't it be, because I want to go back. I was on the select board, and we had a challenge to department heads because we were going through some financial times as well. And the town manager gave a directive of come up with money-making ideas from each department head. And people came up. And whether they were viable or not wasn't the issue. They came up with them, but they weren't. I think there was one thing that was implemented, but it was led, as opposed to, like, say, the department heads didn't come up and say, hey, we got a great idea for you, on how for the town to make money. So some things have to be pushed and some things have to be pulled in government, right? Because sometimes your department heads are busy doing their job day to day, and so they're not thinking of what can I outsource. So is it something that we should be exploring? My question is, and it's a good thing to say, yeah, we should look at it, right? But is it something that we really should look at? Because there's certain things you cannot outsource. You don't want to outsource your police and your fire and your teaching and all that other stuff, right? Because those are cores. But there are some things that within maybe every department that potentially could be outsourced. We did it with,
Sure.
what do you call it, the dispatch unit, right? They consolidated that and took it out of the inside the police department. But is it something that should be led and looked at every situation, or is it something that, as you said, you just mentioned, if a department head feels they need it or something? I mean, I guess there's a.
Well, I didn't mean it that way.
No, that's why I'm asking.
Right, I meant if let's say snow plowing. Our DPW does a great job doing the snow plowing, so maybe it's not a great example. But just for example, you would, if you felt like snow plowing might be something you want to outsource, you'd have to talk to your DPW head and ask, how are we doing with this? What's the quality of our work? How much is it costing man hours? Do we have the ability to do it? Or is it like the lifeguard situation at the pools where we just don't even have enough lifeguards, for example? I think that, one thing that's very useful here is to answer your question, I think the town manager would probably be the point person on this. And what can be very useful, I think, is talking to other town managers in other towns. What are they outsourcing? What did they find was more cost efficient or effective to do when they hired someone else to do it, And that's something that I would ask for the town manager, give him a directive, as to keep an open mind on this and report back to us on what you think about outsourcing and what areas do you think it would be valuable, or maybe there are no areas and we're doing fine. But certainly, for example, in the schools, there are, for example, special needs educational situations where we of course want to keep as many students as possible in our schools, but sometimes the needs are so great, or a child needs something very special, you've got to outsource that stuff, right? We don't even have the capacity to do it. So we are doing these things as needed.
Okay. Is there anything you want to add, Josh?
No, I thank you for rephrasing or following up the question. Yes, I think that it is something that should be looked at, and I'm not, because it's not my line of work, I'm not really thinking of ideas outside of DPW, but I know that DPW does do a good job of outsourcing, and there's a lot of contractors, a lot of bids go out for specialized work, or even like the street sweeping. Is it cheaper to outsource every year, do street sweeping rather than buy 2 street sweepers? So I know they do look at that, but it is something that, it may be small savings, but those add up. So I think it's a good suggestion.
Okay. So as the only person in town that I know of that did not move here because of the school system, me. we didn't have any kids at the time. So my question is, and I say that all the time, because I know most people do move here because of the school system. So I know, and it's important. And you mentioned the middle school project, which is a huge project that we're going to take on, and hopefully does lead to some revenue. But 2/3 of the homeowners in Long Meadow roughly don't have children in the school system. Mm-hmm. How does the select board ensure that their needs are being taken care of in town? And you go first.
Sure.
And that's not a setup question. I'm just saying.
No,
I
absolutely.
know, because that's.
Yeah, I mean, I think that over 70 cents of every dollar is spent on the schools when you add in everything. I think that seniors in this town, most of them or many of them, had kids in the town. Mm-hmm. And when you multiply out, for example, that the town, for example, spends $15,000 per pupil per year, and take a kid K through 12, and maybe you had 3 kids, I got to tell you, if you do the math, most people's property tax, it would take them 30 plus years possibly to even pay that back. So I do think there's a great sense of of commitment in this town among many seniors who enjoy living here, and they also want to stay here, which is great. But I certainly think that we need to ideally find ways to help them live in our town, which they love, in ways that have a little bit of less property tax burden. So for example, I consider myself kind of a long-range planner. I like to picture what our town might look like in 10 years. So obviously, we'd like to have a beautiful new middle school, ideally one possibly at the Williams site, for example. So what will we do with the Greenwood site? The Glenbrook site. So I think, for example, something we should definitely look at is a 55 and over community there, which will give more options for seniors who don't want to have a large home and don't want to necessarily be burdened with so much property tax. I also think, for example, open spaces are very important. I think there's enough land there to consider both a park of some kind and a 55 and over, for example. But I think when it comes down to it, people understand that all of us benefit from rising property values and stable property values in town. I think we all recognize the greatest assets of Longmeadow, in my opinion, are the schools, which keep newcomers coming here willing to buy these dilapidated old houses that need all this work to be fixed up. And of course, our location on 91 is also very attractive. We spent $80 million on the high school about 10 years ago. Boy, that felt like a lot of money at the time. But East Longmeadow is about to build a high school for $180 million. And now we realize we got a steal. We got a great deal. Of course, it also is sobering because we're about to build a middle school that's going to be well over $100 million in a higher interest rate environment. But I think that people recognize that this is necessary. And although, I think it was really good to have the adult center investment. That place is a hive of activity. I think our town needs to continue to just do a good job meeting the needs of all demographics. But I don't think that necessarily, and I'm happy to say that many seniors in town recognize the value of the schools and the benefits of it and are grateful for the education their kids and possibly their grandkids are getting.
Josh?
I'm tempted to say ditto. That's a great answer and exactly what I was thinking about Glenbrook. I think that ideally having an over 55 housing where we are building our tax base, but not burdening the schools, I think would be fantastic, and it would give people the chance to age in place, because I know that is that's something people want to do. They love this town. They grew up here. They raised their kids here. They don't want to move, but they may not need a 3,000 square foot house. So that's something I think would be very important. The other thing we do, and I know a lot of people know about this, but we do have a program for people who can volunteer in town and get some of their property taxes taken off. The state law just changed on that. I think it raised that to maybe $2,000, maybe $2,500. We allowed more people to do it this year. The select board voted on it. So I think that's something that we're doing actively to help people. We're no longer paying for schools. They may have kids that are long out of school. But as for the spending, you're paying for the schools because you want to have a great town, to keep your property values up. And as Andrew said, I think that is absolutely the path to doing it. But there's a lot of people aging in place here. There's a lot of people who are maybe waiting for their kids to come back. And I think that's fantastic. We are doing things to help them, and I hope we continue to do that.
Well, listen, I tell people all the time is that when you look at the value of what you get for here, right, for what I pay in property taxes, I can still walk in my neighborhood and feel relatively safe. You're never safe anywhere, right, 100%, but you feel relatively safe. Police will be at your house in under 2 minutes, right? Ambulance in less than 4. Yeah. So it's what we have here is just it's amazing. You do have to pay for it. So I agree with you guys. All right, so I got a couple. When people heard I was doing this, they asked me to ask you guys a couple of questions. Potholes. Mm-hmm. I was down in Disney. I was down in Disney, and you road test track, and you go over that little bumpy section, and it was actually more comfortable than driving through town sometimes. Mm. So when you look at things like that, and I'm talking about the dump. I'm sorry, the recycle center. My apologies to Arlene Miller. The recycle center, right? It wasn't open. It's open part-time, things like that. How do we control some of those things? I mean, to me, I understand. I understand some of the issues that face in DPW in terms of filling potholes. But when you're driving over them every day, it's kind of hard to tell someone, hey, you're paying your $8,000, $10,000 in taxes, you're getting your bang for your buck, right? So those are the two hot button issues that I've had people ask me to talk about, which is potholes in the DPW recycle center. You have anything on that you want to address that? Or
I will tell you, I hear about the roads constantly. I heard first of all, the paving is a fantastic example of the problem with our budget. We put extra money there. There's just not much, and we get Chapter 90 funds from the state to help with paving. It's not enough. We are so far behind. And one of the things we talked about when we were through this budget season is we can do small things. We can put a new top coat on, fill potholes. That's not what people want. We talked about, and I think that this is something that I spoke about with Lynn, we have to take a big swing. And we have to, instead of every year spending $1 million on paving, which doesn't get you much, we have to maybe take out a bond, take out a loan, and $5 million, and then get a paving plan over the next 4 years. Because if you hire a company and they know that they got 4 years of paving jobs with you, they can plan accordingly, they can budget accordingly, and you get a lot more bang for your buck. So I know it's a concern. My Farmington Avenue had a double whammy of Eversource gas and the water come through, and the street's a mess. There's a lot of streets out there that are worse than it. We had a presentation last year. We should be spending, I can't remember the exact number, it's say at least $8 million a year just to try to keep up. There's no way we can do that with our current revenue. So that's somewhere where we need to be very creative. There was not a plan in place for a long time on what to pave. And Sean Van Dusen is the DPW superintendent. He has a plan, and it may be going slower than people want, and I feel for them. But we have to follow that plan, and we have to plan ahead and go to our most important spots. We will eventually get Route 5 paved. That program, Mark Gold goes to the meetings, the DOT meetings to find out when that project's come along. It is still in the works for a couple of years out, but Eversource has been working on it. If the pipeline goes through, it'll be even worse. And Eversource is slowly starting to fix where they've been working, but it's a massive problem. And I think the answer is take a big swing, look at it holistically, say how can we do this in a better way. As for the dump, I met with a client today who brought that up. He said a lot of people talk about it on the Facebook forum. I don't go on there.
I don't know either.
Yeah, it's
probably healthier.
Yes, it can be. It raises my blood pressure going on there. But if people have questions about that, they should reach out to the select board, not post on the forum. I will just say that because I don't know what it says. I was at the recycling center yesterday. It was humming. But if we needed open more days, which is certainly feasible or reasonable to ask, we have to find room in the budget, and it's very difficult to do that. Even if it's volunteers, you need trucks coming in and out. It's an expensive place to run. So that both of those are great examples of why the problems with our budget and the problems with a built-out town that's 95% residential. Unless we squeeze people, unless people pay a lot more taxes, those are going to be the problems we have going forward.
Okay. Andrew?
I mean, I want to just kind of elaborate on some of the things that Josh brought up. So there's always going to be potholes. Like I certainly think paving plans are important. I do think it's very complicated because sometimes the federal government or the state government will help us plan things, and we're getting grants that make it like the timing to do a sewer project might be more advantageous to do it now, even if it's not necessarily at this moment, because we want to coincide with the time we're happening to get funding to do a town from a federal or state entity. But even if we had a great paving program, there's always going to be potholes. There's always going to be a very visible desire for the recycling center to be good, for example, because these are very, this is the low-hanging fruit that government can do to make people happier and more satisfied. So certainly I think that there has to be an ongoing priority of doing these things that are basically low-hanging fruit. But when it comes down to it, it comes down to priorities, right? Fiscal management. You know, there's a balance, right? We know our schools are our most important asset. We also know our schools are by far the greatest piece of the pie when it comes to the budget, over 70% probably. So, you know, if you really need to, if you decide that your roads, your potholes, your recycling center is reached the point where we need to amplify or increase or augment its budget, well, maybe we need to find other places for that revenue to come from, obviously. And it's very typical to kind of take from priorities that are not that high priorities because people don't notice them, like the OPEB fund, which is like, it's a retirement fund that we should be contributing to that nobody really pays attention to, but select boards in the past, because as JFK once said, it's always better to fix your roof when the sun is shining, they make priorities and say, this is something that we're going to have as a policy. But those policies are so easy to just ignore or override with the immediate things in front of you. So I think that it's important to ask tough questions. You know, on the finance committee, I was kind of known for asking very tough questions. Sometimes petitioners would like think I was totally against their proposal until I later voted for it because I just wanted to make sure we got all the alternatives, like we were maximizing the value of taxpayer money for things like that. So it's not glamorous, but I think that, you know, it's about choices and priorities.
Okay. I got a couple questions, but the one I want to get to before we start getting short on time is, having gone through town meeting more than a few times each, do you think it's the most effective way to run our town, and should the town look for a charter change to kind of go the way of East Long Meadow and eliminate a town meeting? And that's not not a setup question because I'm wholeheartedly against town meeting. But no, I think because you pay people hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to run this place, and it can be blown up in an instant in town meeting, and then you're redoing a budget. But I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I know many people who are strongly in favor of town meeting, strongly against. I'm pretty ambivalent in the sense that I see the benefits, pros and cons of both, right? So it's very nice to live in a town with a town meeting so that it's very direct democracy. Anyone can come up with a citizen's petition, and that can be very productive and encourages people and emboldens them to participate in the democratic process. But the problem is sometimes, you know, in government, as we all have been in, you know, there are long-range plans that take years, years of thinking to make sure, you know, we may have a plan to pave the roads, but what if someone once has a pet project or a special interest to take that money and do something else with it this year? And that person that doesn't necessarily appreciate, well, we need that money to do the roads, or we need that money to do the study that allows us to get a much larger tens of millions of dollars federal grant that will benefit our town greatly, right? So you sometimes lose the forest for the trees, and we're all part of special interests. There's nothing wrong with a special interest. Schools are special interests. Parents and seniors can have special interests. But sometimes in town meeting, there's the long-range planning gets lost because everyone is focused on the hot button issue, you know. So I can see why a town council could be, you know, someone with like a group of people who have the perspective of not only listening to the constituents but also the larger picture can be beneficial. So, but I don't feel that strongly in one way or the other that I'm going to be, you know, strongly advocating that we get rid of town meeting or anything.
This is another thing I hear from, maybe not from residents, but I hear this from my friends a lot, that want to go to town meeting, but they can't make it that night. Somebody has to watch the kids. And I think the church parcel at Redwood and Bliss, I think is a great example of the issues with town meeting. I think that I was very in favor of the rezoning, and it got brought up. When I was on the planning board, I was the only one who voted in favor of it. Came up at town meeting and got shot down, and we lost 2 years of tax revenue in town. The owner lost favorable interest rates, and I really thought it was a shame that happened, because it just wasn't, maybe the people who didn't know it was an issue didn't show up or weren't motivated enough. And then when it came back up 2 years later, it passed overwhelmingly. And that shows, I think, the bad and the good. You can also, if you feel strongly about something, you can round up your friends and get you in there. But as Andrew said, you could, if you want to get your house spot rezoned and have run a business out of your house, if you got enough people to come to town meeting, you can get it through. And that it could be the worst idea in the world, but if you got people there, that's it. But there are issues towns that especially shift to a town council type structure, strong town manager, you can struggle with it. And I think my biggest issue with it is you have somebody, let's say East Long Meadow as an example, has 7 town councilors. You're stepping in for town meeting, you're making the legislative decisions for the town, but you're also, the pressures are different because you're thinking about getting reelected. And so you might think that this is best for the town, but your neighbor will be mad at you if you don't vote for it, or et cetera. So I think it is a great question because it's our oldest form of government. It's maybe not the best, but it's the one we have. And if we do ever change it, I think there's a lot of ramifications to think through. My father was on the Charter Review Commission, the Charter Commission in East Long Meadow, on the Charter Review Commission, and 10 years later they went through line by line to say, oh, we didn't think this is how this was going to work, and let's change it to this. And maybe they went too far the other way, and time will tell. It's a fine line. So I don't come down firmly either way because it'd be the will of the people to do it anyway.
Yeah. Okay. All right. One last question is, how do you judge whether the town is meeting its needs of its residents? And I'll start with you, Josh.
Well, I think that the simple answer is, I think if the schools keep up and the schools are highly ranked and people still come here for our schools, I think that means we're doing our job. Secondarily to that, if we are keeping up our green spaces, we have beautiful parks, we have pools that people are going to, we run camps. I think that means that we're keeping our residents happy. We don't have to, we can't cater to our business side in town because we just don't have a commercial base. And part of that, I think, is we do have to treat them well. I have been in favor of equal tax rate for residential and commercial because I don't want to put the squeeze to our small businesses. We need them here, and I'm glad they are here. To sum it up, our schools are still desirable, and we still have a beautiful town. And our taxes aren't too high because then we'll start hearing from people. But I think that's a successful Long Meadow.
Okay, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that if you had to point to one metric, it's absolutely the desire for people to move here, which was reflected in our property values and how quickly houses are moving off the market. We're in a very nice situation right now, but it illustrates all of the things that we advocate for. The schools, for example, we see that in how young families, how the demand for the homes in our town. So everything's predicated on that. If home valuations went down, our tax rate's going to go up. We're going to have issues. It could be a virtuous cycle or a negative cycle, because then you'll have to make cuts in the schools, and then it'll be less desirable to move here, and it goes down and down, spirals down. So I think we're doing pretty well. I think the next 10 years, I have a vision for a town that's even better. We want to keep Long Meadow the best place to live in Western Mass.
Okay. So what we're going to do is just have final comments. We're going to start with you, Andrew, and you'll have the last word, Josh.
Sure. Thank you, Paul and LCTV, for doing this. It's great to kind of be able to share our views. I'm running for Long Meadow Select Board because I love our town. It's simply as simple as that. And I feel like I have a lot of valuable experience from my 9 years on the Finance Committee. My priority is to always advocate for prudent and judicious fiscal management, especially in a situation that we're going to be finding ourselves in with higher interest rates and ever-increasing employment costs. I'm very meticulous and hardworking and analytical, and I would enjoy serving. And even if I'm not on the select board, I'm going to find many ways to serve our town as well. So thank you for tuning in, and I appreciate your consideration on June 11th.
Josh?
All right, thank you as well, Paul, and the folks at LCTV. I appreciate you having us in here today, and I'm always happy for the chance to speak to people directly. I have been on the select board for a term where I've grown a lot, and I think I've done good work, and I want to continue doing that good work. I have a great relationship with our board, and want to say thank you to Tom Lacusa for 9 years on the board. He's been a mainstay, and but it'll be. I'm looking forward to having some fresh blood on there as well. I will be all of a sudden the second longest serving member, which is pretty wild at one term. So I'm looking to hope to help pass on that knowledge, and I just look forward to serving again, and welcome your vote on June 11th. Thank you.
All right. I want to thank both of you guys for coming here. I appreciate it, your time. I thank you for giving the viewers the opportunity to get to know you and meet you. And I know they know you to see on TV and all the things that you're doing in town. Folks, the election is Tuesday, June 11th. Polls open at 7 o'clock and go till 8 o'clock at night at the community house. Get out there and vote. If you don't vote, you can't complain. That's my point of view, but you have a couple people here who I think have given you some good food for thought about who you're going to, who you could vote for. So thank you for viewing, and again, thank you guys in LCTV for hosting this. Have a great night.